History remembers King George III for two massive failures: losing the American colonies and losing his own sanity. But it almost completely ignores his greatest and most complicated legacy: a sprawling family of 15 children. This wasn't just a royal lineage. It was a human tragedy played out on a grand scale. While the history books focus on political treaties and wars, the real story lies with the princes and princesses who navigated a childhood of extreme discipline while witnessing their father's agonizing decline. From the two infants who never saw adulthood to the daughters kept as virtual prisoners of their father's love, their stories are shocking. Today, we uncover the fates of the 15 children who bore the weight of the crown during one of history's most turbulent eras. Number 15. Princess Amelia was born in 1783, the youngest child of King George III, arriving at a time when the monarch's reign was already showing the faint cracks that would one day widen into tragedy. From the moment she opened her eyes, Amelia became the cherished light of a family strained by duty, politics, and the early signs of their father's illness. She grew up adored, not only by her mother, but by the king himself, who found in her presence a rare tenderness that softened the severity of the crown. Her childhood was filled with learning, music, and moments of quiet joy inside Windsor. Yet beneath that warmth lay an unspoken truth. She had entered a world where innocence never lasted long. As she grew, Amelia revealed a lively spirit that stood out even among her accomplished sisters. She studied languages, danced with a natural grace, and developed a gentle humor that drew affection from everyone around her. Yet her health remained fragile from an early age, and her family watched her carefully, aware that illness often shadows the youngest in a large royal household. When her father's mental struggles deepened, Amelia became both a comfort and a painful reminder of the peace he was losing. Courts, physicians, and courtiers whispered constantly. But inside the royal apartments, she remained the daughter who tried quietly to steady a father fading into confusion. Her turning point came with the onset of tuberculosis, a disease that moved steadily through her young life. The diagnosis dimmed her once bright world, forcing her into long periods of rest and painful treatments that did little to slow the disease. She fell deeply in love with Charles Fitzroy, a man she could not marry under the restrictive laws that governed royal unions. Their relationship remained secret, tender, and filled with a desperate hope that time would not grant them. But as her illness worsened, it became clear that the life she dreamed of would slip away before she ever had the chance to claim it. Amelia died in 1810 at the age of 27, leaving behind a grief that shattered King George III's remaining hold on reality. Her death marked the final break in his mind, sending him into the darkness from which he would never return. Amelia's legacy is that of a young woman whose life was defined by love, frailty, and a heartbreaking connection to the king who adored her. She became the final emotional blow in a story already heavy with burdens. The daughter whose loss closed the last chapter of a monarch's clarity. Number 14. Prince Alfred was born in 1780, a child whose arrival seemed at first like a blessing in a royal household accustomed to constant scrutiny. He was a healthy infant, lively and alert. And for a brief moment, the king and queen allowed themselves to believe that this son, arriving late in a long line of children, might grow into another pillar of the dynasty. His siblings adored him, and even the stern routines of palace life softened whenever Alfred was carried through the halls. But beneath the surface of early joy lay a fragility that would reveal itself with devastating speed. His early life unfolded quietly inside Buckingham House and Windsor, surrounded by nurses, tutors, and the studied calm that hovered around favored young royals. Yet even in infancy, Alfred's health wavered. Fevers arrived with no warning, and his constitution weakened despite constant care. His mother, Queen Charlotte, watched his condition with growing fear, and King George, who rarely showed vulnerability in public, became deeply attached to the little boy, whose smile seemed to momentarily lift the weight of monarchy from his shoulders. Alfred grew slowly, tenderly and under constant protection. But everyone close to him sensed the shadow growing at the edge of his short life. The turning point came when he developed a severe illness, likely smallpox or a similar infection, which ravaged his already delicate body. Physicians came and went, offering remedies that did nothing to halt the relentless decline. For days his parents kept vigil, suspended between hope and dread, while the palace fell into a quiet unlike anything it had known before. Alfred's suffering marked one of the first great emotional blows to the royal family, a reminder that even within palaces, fate rarely negotiates. Prince Alfred died in 1782 at just under 2 years old, a loss that left the royal household shaken. King George III, who had weathered political storms without flinching, broke down in grief. Queen Charlotte retreated into herself, mourning the child she could not save. Alfred's death did not echo through history with wars or treaties, but it carved deep emotional scars into a family already stretched by duty and expectation. His short life remains a poignant chapter in the story of George III's children, a reminder of mortality in a world built to appear untouchable. Number 13. Prince Octavius was born in 1779, a child whose gentleness became a rare source of calm inside a household increasingly shaped by political strain and the king's growing bouts of instability. He was the 8th son, arriving when King George III still believed his family could anchor him against the storms gathering around his reign. Octavius possessed a sweetness that captured the affection of everyone who cared for him. Courtiers described him as unusually serene, a boy whose presence softened the rigid formality of royal life. For a monarch who struggled to find moments of peace, Octavius became a quiet refuge. His early years unfolded within the tightly structured world of the royal nurseries, where discipline blended with affection. Tutors praised his attentiveness, and nurses adored him for his calm, warm nature. He grew close to his siblings, forming a small circle of companionship that briefly allowed the royal household to feel like a family rather than an institution. King George III, in particular, developed a profound bond with Octavius. He often lifted the boy into his arms, spoke to him with an intimacy rare for a king, and once said that losing Octavius would be the greatest blow that could happen to me. Those words would prove heartbreakingly prophetic. The turning point arrived in 1783, when Octavius received a routine smallpox inoculation. At the time, the procedure was dangerous but necessary, and the royal family had long accepted its risks. But for reasons no physician could fully explain, the inoculation triggered a rapid decline. Fever overwhelmed his young body, and within days, the quiet, affectionate boy who had brought so much peace to his father slipped beyond the reach of medicine. The palace, which had weathered political uproar with stoic control, fell into stunned disbelief as the news spread. Prince Octavius died at the age of 4, and his father's grief was immediate and devastating. King George III, who endured parliamentary attacks and colonial rebellions with unyielding resolve, broke under the weight of this loss. He insisted that Octavius was not truly gone, and spoke of him as if he still lived, a tragic foreshadowing of the mental collapse that would soon engulf his reign. Octavius's brief life remains one of the most sorrowful chapters in the family's history, a reminder that even amid crowns and kingdoms, a father can shatter over the loss of the child he loved most deeply. Number 12. Princess Sophia was born in 1777, entering a royal household already strained by duty, expectation, and the slow, unseen beginnings of the king's mental decline. From her earliest years, Sophia displayed a softness that made her both endearing and vulnerable. She was gentle, empathetic, and inclined toward reflection, traits that set her apart in a family shaped by discipline and public obligation. While her older siblings carried the weight of dynastic futures, Sophia grew in the quiet corners of the palace, seeking solace in music, books, and the company of those who treated her not as a princess, but as a young woman longing for a space of her own. Her early life unfolded under the strict supervision of Queen Charlotte, whose determination to mold her daughters into models of virtue left them isolated from society. Sophia and her sisters lived under rules that governed everything from their movements to their friendships, creating a world that was polished but suffocating. Yet within this confinement, Sophia developed a graceful intelligence and a kind of emotional intuition that made her deeply sympathetic to others. Still, her position offered little freedom. Behind the perfect surfaces of court life, loneliness crept in, and she became increasingly vulnerable to influences outside the rigid control of the royal household. The turning point in Sophia's life came in the form of a scandal concealed from the public for decades. She formed an attachment to Thomas Garth, a royal equerry, a relationship that both defied social expectations and carried devastating consequences. Sophia gave birth to a son in secret, a child whose existence was whispered about but never publicly acknowledged within the family. The episode shattered her already delicate sense of identity and deepened the isolation that had shaped so much of her youth. While the court quietly buried the scandal, Sophia lived with its emotional weight for the rest of her life, caught between loyalty to her family and the reality of a decision that had changed her forever. Sophia's later years unfolded in a haze of declining health and emotional retreat. She remained unmarried and increasingly dependent on the quiet rhythms of domestic life within the royal residences. When she died in 1848, she left behind a legacy marked not by public triumphs, but by the poignant complexity of a woman trapped between duty and desire. Her life stands as one of the most human stories among George III's children, a reminder that even within the glitter of monarchy, private heartbreak can shape a destiny as profoundly as any crown. Number 11. Princess Mary was born in 1776, a child who entered the royal household at a moment when the British Empire was fracturing abroad, but still rigidly controlled at home. From the beginning, Mary displayed a composed strength that set her apart from her more fragile siblings. She possessed a calm intelligence, a steadiness of temperament, and a willingness to shoulder responsibility that made her one of Queen Charlotte's most reliable daughters. In a family marked by volatility and hidden turmoil, Mary grew into the quiet anchor her parents valued but did not always understand. Her early life unfolded within the same strict confinement imposed on all the royal princesses. The rules were suffocating in their precision. No public social life, no unsupervised interactions, no freedom to travel, and above all, no possibility of marriage without the king's explicit approval. Within this gilded cage, Mary developed discipline and patience, mastering languages, literature, and the refined arts expected of a princess. Yet beneath the polished surface, she carried a longing for independence that the palace walls could not entirely contain. She watched her brothers move freely through military careers and political paths, while she and her sisters remained locked in a world carefully engineered to preserve propriety. Mary's turning point arrived late in life, when she finally received permission to marry Prince William Frederick, Duke of Gloucester and Edinburgh. By then she was 40 years old, far beyond the age when most royal women of her era married. Yet she embraced the chance for personal happiness with remarkable dignity. Her marriage was not a political alliance, but a union built on mutual affection. And for the first time, she stepped into a life shaped by her own choices rather than her mother's dictates. The transition brought her a quiet joy, long deferred, a reprieve from the decades of rigid control that had defined her youth. In her later years, Princess Mary became a respected figure within the royal family, known for her loyalty, steadiness, and unpretentious warmth. She served as a bridge between generations, a living memory of the long, turbulent reign of George III. When she died in 1857, she left behind a legacy of resilience and understated strength, a life that revealed not dramatic rebellion, but a profound endurance. Mary's story stands as a testament to the courage required to live with grace inside a system that offered little freedom, and to the dignity she maintained even as the world around her changed in ways her father never lived to see. Number 10. Prince Adolphus, Duke of Cambridge, was born in 1774, arriving in a royal household already disciplined, orderly, and built around the expectations of military and political service. From the beginning, Adolphus showed a sharp mind and a disciplined temperament, traits that made him one of King George III's most capable sons. Unlike his brothers who struggled with scandal, excess, or the weight of succession, Adolphus grew into a man shaped by structure rather than rebellion. His upbringing unfolded under the watchful eye of tutors determined to mold the young prince into a model of princely responsibility. His early years took him through a demanding education, one centered on languages, statecraft, and the rigorous routines expected of a future military commander. Adolphus embraced discipline with unusual enthusiasm, earning respect for his diligence and clarity of purpose. When he was sent to Germany to complete his military training, he thrived in an environment where merit outweighed privilege. Those years abroad refined him into a soldier of competence and character, qualities that would set him apart as he moved into adulthood. His defining turning point came during his service in the British Army, where he proved himself not merely a royal officer, but a strategic thinker trusted by senior commanders. His military career carried him through positions of leadership in Hanover, where he eventually became the viceroy, governing with a steadiness that won admiration in both German and British circles. Unlike his brothers who courted controversy, Adolphus built his reputation on reliability and reason. His marriage to Princess Augusta of Hesse-Kassel strengthened his ties to the German territories and produced 3 children, further establishing his branch of the royal family as one grounded in duty rather than drama. Prince Adolphus lived a long and stable life, dying in 1850 after decades of public service. His legacy stands as one of competence, consistency, and loyalty. In a family marked by turbulence and personal conflict, Adolphus carved a life defined by the virtues his father prized but could not always embody: discipline, steadiness, and unwavering commitment to duty. His story reveals that not every royal child is destined for chaos. Some, like Adolphus, leave behind the quiet but powerful legacy of a life lived with purpose and restraint. Number 9. Prince Augustus Frederick, Duke of Sussex, was born in 1773. A child whose life would stand in sharp contrast to the rigid expectations of the Hanoverian court. From an early age, Augustus displayed a temperament far more liberal, curious, and intellectually restless than the structured world of his father's monarchy allowed. He gravitated toward ideas rather than command, toward books rather than battalions, and toward personal conviction rather than dynastic obedience. In a family governed by discipline, Augustus quickly became the son who questioned the very rules designed to shape him. His early years unfolded under the same strict educational regime imposed on all the princes, but he absorbed his lessons differently. Where some of his brothers embraced military certainty, Augustus became drawn to philosophy, culture, and emerging debates on religious toleration and political reform. His tutors noted both his brilliance and his refusal to accept tradition without scrutiny. Unlike many of his siblings, he did not view the crown as a symbol to be protected at all costs. He viewed it as an institution that must evolve with its people. This mindset, radical for the era, set the stage for the personal conflicts that would define his adult life. The turning point arrived when Augustus secretly married Lady Augusta Murray, without the king's consent, a direct violation of the Royal Marriages Act. The union was declared invalid, the couple forcibly separated, and their children rendered illegitimate under English law. The scandal tore through the royal household, igniting conflict between Augustus and the crown that lasted for decades. Yet despite the pressure, Augustus refused to abandon his convictions. He continued advocating for religious freedom, Jewish emancipation, and political reform, becoming one of the most progressive voices within the extended royal family. His refusal to bow to convention made him both admired and feared within elite circles. In his later years, Prince Augustus became a respected scholar and patron of learning, serving as president of the Royal Society and chancellor of the University of London. He died in 1843, leaving behind a legacy unlike any of his brothers, a legacy not of battlefield triumphs or governing power, but of intellectual courage and principled defiance. His life revealed that even within the walls of monarchy, a voice of dissent can reshape the boundaries of tradition, and his story stands as one of the most unexpected and compelling chapters in the lineage of George III. Number 8. Prince Ernest Augustus was born in 1771, entering a world that expected every royal son to become either a soldier, a statesman, or a symbol. From the moment he could walk, Ernest embodied the stern discipline of the Hanoverian military tradition. He possessed a commanding presence and a force of will that set him apart from his brothers. Where some were gentle, scholarly, or rebellious, Ernest carried an intensity that made him both formidable and deeply polarizing. Even as a child, he seemed destined for a life that would require certainty rather than doubt, and authority rather than concession. His early years unfolded under a demanding educational system designed to prepare him for military leadership. Ernest thrived in the environment of drills, order, and hierarchy. He trained in Germany, where the strict discipline suited him, and grew into a warrior prince with a reputation for fearlessness. But this same forceful disposition also created friction. He inspired loyalty among some and unease in others. For Ernest possessed the kind of confidence that could edge into severity. His devotion to duty was absolute. Yet the intensity that fueled his achievements would also fuel the controversies that followed him for the rest of his life. His turning point arrived when he became the Duke of Cumberland, and later, through the complex laws of succession, King of Hanover. While Britain embraced change, expanding political rights and softening royal absolutism, Ernest steered Hanover in the opposite direction. He abolished liberal reforms, reinstated rigid structures, and positioned himself as a staunch defender of monarchical authority. His reign was marked by unrest and resistance, but Ernest refused to bend. Accusations and scandals, some unproven, others exaggerated, followed him throughout his life, shaping a public image steeped in suspicion. Yet despite the clouds that surrounded him, he remained unwavering, convinced that his purpose was not to be loved, but to preserve stability as he understood it. Ernest Augustus died in 1851, leaving behind one of the most divisive legacies among George III's sons. To his supporters, he was a pillar of strength in an age of unsettling change. To his critics, he represented a stubborn refusal to adapt to the modern world. His life reveals the harsher edge of the Hanoverian dynasty, a story not of compromise, but of unyielding conviction. Among the 15 children of King George III, Ernest stands as the embodiment of power exercised without apology, a reminder that monarchy can shape men as profoundly as men shape monarchy. Number 7. Princess Elizabeth was born in 1770. A child whose life would unfold between the rigid expectations of the court and her own quiet determination to claim a measure of happiness. From an early age, she showed a warmth and emotional clarity that distinguished her from her more turbulent brothers. Elizabeth possessed a natural grace and a quiet resilience that made her one of Queen Charlotte's most reliable daughters. Yet beneath her composure lived a deep longing for independence, a yearning carefully hidden beneath layers of courtly discipline. Her early life unfolded in the same tightly controlled environment imposed on all royal princesses. Lessons, routines, and rules shaped every hour of her day. She watched her brothers pursue military careers, political ambitions, and personal freedoms entirely inaccessible to her. The court praised her gentleness, but gentleness did not free her. Elizabeth grew into adulthood within the suffocating confines of palace life, surrounded by siblings who faced their own burdens, but granted far more agency than any daughter of the king could hope for. The isolation of the royal daughters became her constant companion, sharpening her quiet desire for a life not defined by duty alone. Her turning point arrived when, after decades of constraint, she finally secured a marriage at the age of 48 to Prince Friedrich of Hesse-Homburg. The union was unexpectedly happy, marked by mutual respect and genuine affection rather than political necessity. In Hesse-Homburg, Elizabeth flourished. She transformed her new home into a place of beauty and order, designing gardens, supporting local charities, and emerging as a beloved figure among her people. The liberation from her mother's rigid household allowed her to grow into the woman she had long suppressed, a woman of energy, imagination, and dignity. Princess Elizabeth died in 1840, leaving behind a legacy defined not by royal protocol, but by the quiet triumph of personal fulfillment. Among George III's daughters, she was one of the few who escaped the confines of their gilded prison late in life and discovered happiness on her own terms. Her story stands as a testament to endurance, to the slow but determined pursuit of freedom, and to the possibility of finding joy even after decades of waiting behind palace walls. Number 6. Princess Augusta Sophia was born in 1768, the second daughter of King George III. A child whose quiet disposition and thoughtful spirit stood in contrast to the growing tensions within the royal household. From her earliest years, Augusta carried an air of gentleness that drew affection from those around her. She possessed a reflective nature, a tendency to observe rather than to assert, and a sensitivity that made her deeply attuned to the emotional currents of her family. In a court defined by ceremony, hierarchy, and constant scrutiny, she became one of the most inward-looking of the king's daughters. Her early life unfolded under the strict supervision of Queen Charlotte, whose iron discipline shaped the upbringing of all the princesses. Education consumed their days, but isolation shaped their nights. The royal daughters were kept apart from the social world, their prospects for marriage stifled by a mother unwilling to lose control of her household. In this polished confinement, Augusta developed deep ties to her sisters, but few opportunities to see beyond the palace walls. Her gentle personality made her obedient to the rules placed upon her. Yet beneath that obedience lingered a quiet ache for freedom and affection. Her turning point came in the form of a forbidden attachment to Sir Brent Spencer, an Irish officer whose quiet dignity matched her own. The relationship, sustained in secrecy for years, offered Augusta a glimpse of the life she could never have. Their bond was sincere, but royal protocol left no room for such a union. Augusta lived with the knowledge that love, in her world, was a privilege granted to men and denied to princesses whose futures were bound to dynastic strategy. The affair remained unresolved, suspended between hope and impossibility, becoming both her solace and her sorrow. Augusta's later years unfolded in narrowing circles, marked by chronic illness and the emotional strain of watching her father descend into madness. She became increasingly reclusive, the walls of the royal residences closing around her, as the world outside moved toward a modern age she would never fully enter. She died in 1840, leaving behind a legacy defined not by public deeds, but by the quiet tragedy of a woman born into rank, yet denied the freedoms that might have allowed her gentleness to bloom. Augusta Sophia's story remains one of the most intimate and heartbreaking among George III's daughters, a reminder of how deeply the crown could confine the hearts of those born to wear its shadow. Number 5. Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, was born in 1767, a child whose destiny would reach far beyond his own lifetime. From his earliest days, Edward exhibited a seriousness, a clarity of purpose, and a sense of personal discipline that set him apart from many of his brothers. He lacked their impulsiveness, their taste for scandal, or their battles with authority. Instead, he possessed a deliberate steadiness that seemed almost at odds with the turbulence that often surrounded the Hanoverian household. Even as a boy, Edward carried himself with the awareness that duty was not merely expected of him. It was the framework through which he intended to live. His early years unfolded within the rigorous military culture chosen for many of George III's sons. Yet, Edward approached it not with reluctant obedience, but with measured resolve. He trained extensively in Germany, immersing himself in the orderly systems that shaped his character. Unlike his brothers, who alternated between rebellion and compliance, Edward approached discipline as a tool for self-mastery. He became fluent in multiple languages, showed keen interest in political philosophy, and developed a reputation for being both principled and exacting. Yet beneath that controlled exterior lay a man shaped by the loneliness of royal expectations. A man searching for purpose beyond the role assigned to him. His turning point came when he assumed roles in the British Army and later in colonial administration, where he revealed a strong commitment to reform and fairness. Edward advocated for improved conditions for soldiers, challenging corruption and inefficiency. His progressive attitudes drew both admiration and irritation within the military hierarchy. But his defining moment in history arrived not through his career, but through his daughter. After years of navigating financial strain, personal missteps, and the pressures of dynastic responsibility, Edward married Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld. Their union produced a single child, Princess Alexandrina Victoria, known to the world as Queen Victoria. Prince Edward died in 1820, when Victoria was less than a year old, never knowing he had fathered one of the most influential monarchs in world history. His legacy is inseparable from hers. Though his own life was marked by discipline, duty, and quiet struggle, it was his daughter who would reimagine the British monarchy for the modern age. Edward's story underscores a profound truth about the House of Hanover. Sometimes the most enduring legacy is not the life one shapes, but the life one brings into the world. Number 4. Princess Charlotte, the Princess Royal, was born in 1766 as the first daughter of King George III, entering a world that expected perfection from every royal child, but placed an especially heavy burden on the eldest daughter. From the moment she could walk, Charlotte was trained not only to obey, but to represent. She was the prototype of what a princess should be: disciplined, graceful, and unwaveringly dutiful. Yet beneath the polished exterior lay a young woman shaped by strict confinement, deep loyalty, and a quiet determination to carve a life beyond the suffocating expectations of the British court. Her early years unfolded under Queen Charlotte's relentless regime for the royal daughters. Education was rigorous, movements were restricted, and social contact beyond the palace walls was nearly non-existent. Charlotte became her mother's dependable shadow, mastering languages, arts, and the refined manners demanded of a future consort. As the Princess Royal, she bore responsibility not only for herself, but for the example she set for her younger sisters. Still, within this rigid world, she developed a sharp wit, a strong will, and a talent for navigating the emotional tension that simmered within a family governed by discipline and haunted by the king's worsening bouts of illness. Her turning point arrived when she married Frederick, the future King Frederick of Württemberg, in 1797. The union removed her from the claustrophobic orbit of the British court and delivered her into the complexities of a German duchy marked by political unrest. Württemberg was not a serene refuge. It was a state undergoing transformation, war, and shifting alliances. Yet Charlotte met these challenges with a steadiness that surprised those who had underestimated her quiet strength. When her husband became king, Charlotte became queen consort, a role she fulfilled with dignity and composure, navigating European court politics with a confidence she had never been permitted to display in Britain. Charlotte died in 1828, leaving behind a legacy defined by resilience, adaptability, and a quiet assertion of identity. She was the daughter who escaped the iron grip of Queen Charlotte's household, the princess who proved that duty did not require silence, and the queen who held her own in a world far more volatile than the one she had left behind. Her life stands as a testament to the ways in which strength can flourish once confinement gives way to opportunity. Number 3. Prince William was born in 1765. A child destined from the beginning to stand closer to the throne than almost any of his siblings. From early childhood, William displayed a restless energy and a bold, unrestrained spirit that set him apart from the disciplined formality of the Hanoverian household. He laughed louder, climbed higher, questioned more boldly, and pushed harder against the boundaries set before him. Even King George III, a father who valued order and restraint, recognized that William carried a fire none of his brothers possessed. This intensity would propel him into a life marked by danger, scandal, reinvention, and ultimately, a crown he never expected to wear. His early years unfolded within the royal system that sent the king's sons into military training. But for William, the path was not mere obligation, it was liberation. At 13, he joined the Royal Navy as a midshipman, serving not as a pampered prince, but as a working sailor. William embraced the rough camaraderie of ship life, the storms, the battles, the hard labor on deck. He fought in the American Revolutionary War, survived naval engagements, and rose through the ranks by merit rather than birth. The sea shaped him into a man defined by loyalty, courage, and an unruly independence that later made him one of the most unpredictable figures in the royal family. His turning point arrived long before the crown ever touched his head. William's personal life grew notorious, marked by his long partnership with the actress Dorothea Jordan, with whom he had 10 children. The relationship defied royal expectation and stirred constant controversy. Yet William remained devoted to her for 2 decades. But as succession crises swept through the family, after the deaths of Princess Charlotte, the grandchildren's scandals, and the failure of his brothers to produce legitimate heirs, William's life transformed. He separated from Dorothea, married Princess Adelaide of Saxe-Meiningen, and finally stepped into the role destiny had delayed for decades. In 1830, after the death of his brother George IV, William unexpectedly became King William IV. His reign was brief but transformative. He presided over the passage of the Reform Act of 1832, a monumental shift in British parliamentary democracy. And he navigated political upheaval with a surprising wisdom shaped by his years at sea and his understanding of ordinary life. When he died in 1837, he left behind a legacy marked by contradictions. The sailor king, the unpredictable rebel, the unlikely reformer, and the man who cleared the path for the long Victorian age that would follow. William's story reveals the extraordinary arc of a prince who began his life on the waves and ended it on a throne, carrying with him the rough honesty and resilience he learned far from the halls of power. Number 2. Prince Frederick, Duke of York, was born in 1763, the second son of King George III, a child whose life would be defined not by the throne he would never inherit, but by the reforms he forced upon an army struggling under the weight of outdated tradition. From the moment he entered the world, Frederick carried the expectations reserved for a spare heir. He was to be loyal, disciplined, and ready to serve the crown without ever leading it. Yet beneath his polished manners and dutiful obedience lay a man of sharp intelligence and fierce determination, one who would reshape Britain's military structure with a clarity his more impulsive brothers seldom achieved. His early years unfolded under a stringent educational program tailored specifically for a future commander. Frederick was sent to Hanover for military training, where he immersed himself in tactics, discipline, and the hard realities of soldiering. Unlike his brothers, many of whom resisted the strictures placed on them, Frederick embraced the military ethos with seriousness and ambition. He grew into an officer who understood both the mechanics of warfare and the flaws weakening the British Army. Even as a young man, he displayed a concern for efficiency and reform, a trait rare among princes raised in comfort. His turning point came during the scandals that threatened to engulf his career. Despite his talent and commitment, Frederick found himself mired in controversy, most notably the Mary Ann Clark affair, in which his mistress was accused of selling military commissions with his knowledge. Parliament raged, newspapers mocked him, and his reputation seemed irreparably damaged. Yet Frederick did not collapse under the weight of disgrace. Once the storm subsided, he returned with renewed focus and initiated sweeping reforms that would define his legacy. He modernized training, reorganized the command structure, improved discipline, and laid the groundwork for the efficient, professional army that would one day defeat Napoleon at Waterloo. Frederick died in 1827. remembered not for the scandal that nearly destroyed him, but for the institutional strength he left behind. His legacy is woven into the very fabric of British military history, a commander who transformed weakness into resilience, disorder into precision. Among King George III's sons, Frederick stands as the one who rebuilt an army, proving that a royal life marked by error can also be redeemed through purpose, reform, and an unyielding determination to serve with integrity. Number 1. George, Prince of Wales, was born in 1762 as the long-awaited heir to King George III, entering a world that expected him to embody stability, dignity, and the disciplined virtues of the Hanoverian dynasty. Yet from the moment he could form opinions of his own, George revealed a temperament entirely unlike his father's. He was brilliant, charming, flamboyant, and driven by appetite rather than restraint. Where King George III sought moral order, the Prince of Wales sought pleasure. Where the king valued austerity, the prince embraced extravagance. This tension forged the stormy relationship that would shape both their lives and the destiny of the British crown. His early years unfolded beneath the heavy gaze of expectation. Tutors drilled him in statecraft, etiquette, and the refined arts befitting a future king. But George strained constantly against their constraints. He developed exceptional taste in architecture, music, and fashion. Yet he also inherited the darker inheritance of privilege, impulsiveness, indulgence, and a relentless desire to escape the rigid world his father created. As he grew older, the conflict between father and son intensified, turning the royal household into a battleground between duty and defiance. George perfected the art of appearing regal in public while living recklessly in private. His turning point arrived not through triumph, but through excess. Debts mounted in staggering sums, scandals surrounded his romantic life, and his secret marriage to Maria Fitzherbert, illegal under the Royal Marriages Act, ignited a crisis that threatened the monarchy itself. By the time he was appointed Prince Regent in 1811, his father had collapsed into madness, and George assumed power as a man shaped more by desire than discipline. Yet, in this moment of crisis, he surprised the nation. As regent and later as King George IV, he supported ministers who stabilized Britain after the Napoleonic Wars and sponsored cultural achievements that transformed London's architectural identity. Still, the contradictions never left him. He was a king capable of elegance and vision, yet haunted by excess, bitterness, and strained relationships that consumed his private life. George V died in 1830, leaving behind a legacy as conflicted as the man himself. To some, he was a patron of the arts who enriched Britain's cultural landscape. To others, he was the irresponsible son who fractured his family and exhausted a kingdom's patience. Among the 15 children of King George III, he stands as the heir who inherited the crown, but not the discipline of the father who shaped him. His life remains a vivid reminder that monarchy magnifies both brilliance and flaw, and that the weight of a crown can crush even those born to wear it. The story of King George III's 15 children is not the tale of a simple dynasty, but a sweeping human drama unfolding behind the facade of monarchy. They were born into a world that demanded obedience, restraint, and perfection, yet their lives reveal the full spectrum of human possibility. Some rose to rule: George IV as a king of contradictions, and William IV as the unexpected sailor who transformed into a reforming monarch. Others shaped armies, like Frederick, who rebuilt Britain's military strength, or Adolphus, who governed Hanover with unwavering discipline. Still others forged quieter but equally powerful paths. Charlotte, who became a queen in a foreign land. Augusta and Sophia, who bore the emotional cost of a life lived behind locked palace doors. And Elizabeth and Mary, who discovered freedom only after decades of confinement. 2 sons, Octavius and Alfred, did not live long enough to carve their destinies, yet their deaths left wounds that shaped the emotional landscape of the royal household and deepened the shadows over their father's mind. And at the heart of the dynasty's long future stood Edward, Duke of Kent, whose daughter Victoria would redefine the monarchy for generations. Together, these 15 lives reveal a family built on duty, but fractured by the very expectations that were meant to hold it together. Their stories form a mosaic of resilience, rebellion, tragedy, and unexpected triumph. Through them, the legacy of King George III becomes far more than that of a monarch who lost an empire. It becomes the story of children who carried the weight of a crown in every breath, each forging a path shaped by the collision between personal longing and royal obligation. If you would like, I can now format this full script into a documentary-style voiceover, expand it to longer sections, or create a shorter cinematic version for video production.